I think would be interesting. I think we've talked through the shareholder vote. We've talked through what happened with this whole thing of reallocation. I don't know about you, Herbert, but maybe it'd be interesting to just talk about 8.8. It's 60, was it 65 days away from 8.8, and I'd kick it off. I think somewhere inside of Tesla there is a version of car software that's got robotaxi capability. I believe there's a training bin, or there's a training module ready to go. I believe that there's a version of the app that's there's a prototype version of the app that's running. It'd be interesting. They may be at the point now where somebody can open an app and actually have a car summoned to them and drive up to them. Who knows? I mean, we're all speculating, but it's 65 days away. I don't know if anybody has any additional thoughts on the 8.8 event and the importance of it.
One potential out there, I think it's a small one. Could they announce a partnership on August 8th? If he wants to make, he made a big deal about August 8th, right? It's being built up as being a very important, pivotal milestone. People are now getting so excited. Initially, I just thought that it was just going to be, here's the prototype of the Robotaxi first design vehicle. Here's what our plans in the future. Many people are expecting more than just that. So if he doesn't want to disappoint, if he's able to wrangle up some sort of partnership, you had Jim Farley being interviewed recently, and he spoke very highly about Elon and Tesla, that they have mutual respect. He spoke very highly about the supercharger partnership. He was saying that they are, the most scaled of the supercharger rollout, more than any of the other car maker partners out there. And he said that we are number 2 in the US behind Tesla. So it just sounded like the way he was speaking that he knew what capabilities Ford is able to do. He danced around that we're, not an AI company, we're a product company. And so that's the possibility, right? But I also agree that there could be a partnership with a Chinese car company, as a Baidu CEO, or the general manager of their autonomous vehicle division, said that we'd be very open to a partnership with Tesla. So what do you guys think? What's the chances of that?
I think it could be pretty high. I mean, it's either, Elon said on the earnings call in April that conversations are now underway with a major OEM for licensing FSD. This isn't even Robotaxi yet. It's licensing FSD. So does that get announced as part of that event? Does it get announced on the earnings call, which would be, I guess, before that, right? In July. I think you're in the final strokes of that. I mean, it may take some period of time. Maybe it's just more progress gets announced in July, like we're getting closer, or maybe new partners have been added to the discussion. But I think we're inching closer to it. And the way you measure that is anybody else closer to full autonomy at scale that's profitable? Remember, full autonomy at scale that is profitable. That's what, that's a real analysis that needs to be done. You can't just say, I saw a YouTube video for 20 seconds of some taxi in China and say, well, somebody's already done it. Or you can't talk about Cruise, who's losing, $3 billion a year, and say they've done it. They haven't done anything. You don't have a product unless you have a path to eventually making money on it and having it be profitable. So yeah, I think you have to look out there and say, has somebody gotten measurably or quantifiably closer to profitable autonomy at scale? And quite frankly, somebody will. I think Tesla will be first, in my opinion, for profitable autonomy that can scale both units and economically. But I think there's others that will figure it out over time. It's a question of how long is the lead in time and performance and in economics.
Okay, we'll get to you, Simon, shortly. I just want to ask Omar, you've been to quite a number of these events, and you know how Elon treats these Tesla presentations. what's the worst case scenario, right? So he comes out and just completely, disappoints everybody. There's nothing there. If this is a negative event after a negative June 13th event, what's the chances that that could happen? And then what's the chances that the opposite could happen? Does he do the old Apple Steve Jobs, oh, here's one more thing, and blow you away? What's your experience in the past?
Well, he's not Steve Jobs. He's Elon. He's on the spectrum. He's not as eloquent, but I'm sure they'll make it a nice presentation. I think what always happens is that people have so much time to just let their imagination run wild and conjure all these incredible things that they imagine happening at this event, that the event happens and some really exciting news is announced and they're disappointed because they just expected something crazy that wasn't really realistic. This is a vehicle unveil, right? So a Robotaxi built on the unbox process. It's going to have no steering wheels and pedals, no controls, and it's going to be a reimagining of the car. I mean, if that's boring, you know, what are you expecting exactly? This is an incredible moment in history, really, and I'm so excited to see what the Tesla design team has come up with, what their vision of a driverless future is. I don't think there's going to be any partnerships. I don't think they're going to launch a ride hailing service. Maybe they'll talk a little bit about how the rideshare service will work. But this is just really primarily a vehicle unveil. They're showing us a new vehicle they've designed. And that's really what I expect it to be about. So if you're expecting a vehicle unveil, I think you're going to get a vehicle unveil. First vehicle based on the unboxed process. First Tesla vehicle ever without any controls. If you remember the 2019 Autonomy Day, Elon ended it with a picture of a Model 3 without any steering wheels or pedals. And he said, this is where we're going. Well, here we are in 2024. They're ready to unveil that vehicle. And I expect it to start production in late 2025 and hit volume in 2026. And we're also going to get a demo. We're going to get a live demo of the thing working. It's not just a fake car. We're going to get a demo showing how it works and see that live for the first time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Omar. Simon, welcome up to the stage. Thank you for joining again.
Thanks, Omar. Yeah, you couldn't have said it better. I think out of all of the presentations I've seen in the past, maybe one has not delivered. It was the 4680 presentation, and okay, it's late, but I assume eventually they will. But every time they come out with a new product and I watch the presentation, I'm blown away. I share it with friends. I said, look at this, the Cybertruck. They've just ruined the entire market in the United States. Market the next day, tumble. Their Optimus robot. I'm blown away, which they're delivering on, and so every product they come out and they have these events. I agree with you that everybody gets their expectations up. I come away with it, and I think most people in this community come away, and you're blown away. And they actually do deliver, and they revolutionize that market that they're going into, whether it be the Model 3 or the Model S, the Model Y. They kill it. But on the announcement, I just think that it doesn't get to, it doesn't go through analysts' head, and the market, usually there's just tumbleweeds. I think we all watched the first version of Elon driving through California on version 12, and we actually talked about on our call with clients, and we said people are going to remember this day as the day that artificial intelligence begins to drive cars, and mark this day. And the next day there was, like I said, tumbleweeds in the market. People just ignored it. So I think people are missing. I think you're right. They're going to have something amazing, but I don't know if the market's going to react. My question actually was to the group. Maybe Holmar, as you can talk about this earlier, you guys were speaking about the the power consumption. And I'm looking at this from two perspectives. One, an investment perspective of we own some renewable energy companies that provide power to some of these. And also, is this going to create a bottleneck? Because I'm wondering how much does 100, let's say this computer that they're talking about is 100 exaflops. And by my calculations, am I off? I'm looking at this and going, on the low end, it's 200 or 20 gigawatts. On the high end, 30 or 40. That's enough to power a state, a small state in the United States, a city of 2 million people. It would, I'm from the Maritimes in Canada, it would shut down the entire Maritimes. That's how much all of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI consume, or almost the entire amount of Quebec. Am I accurate on some of that? And we also saw a deal with Brookfield Renewable and Microsoft. They already provide Microsoft with 1 gigawatt, and their agreement is to provide another 10.5 gigawatts. And so we see, similar to what we've seen in the battery event early on, people were competing for battery resources. And is this going to create a bottleneck? And what are you guys seeing in terms of power consumption? And Holmars, where are they at right now in terms of the size of their supercomputer capabilities, and how much power do you think that it's using?
So I think Elon threw out a number today where he said maybe, long term it could be less than 5 gigawatts. So, I think you have to remember Moore's law. Your performance per watt keeps increasing. NVIDIA's putting out their new Blackwells, they're putting out their new Rubins. Each time you're getting more performance and less power density as you continue to add to that cluster. So I think probably, this is an enormous power draw. So really what we're looking at, I think, globally is a dramatic increase in power consumption, electric consumption. Why? Well, we're already moving all kinds of fossil fuel use cases to the electric grid because we know how to produce electricity without generating emissions. So, for example, cars, buses, trucks, things like that are now being moved to electric. Home heating, which often was done by natural gas, often now done with heat pumps, electricity. And then on top of that, you've got now these data centers, which are just growing like crazy and are sucking in power at such a scale that it really is material for the grid. And many times the grid can't support it. And these training clusters, they have to be tightly co-located. You have to put them together so they can access all the training data and be close to each other. It's very different than, say, a web service. So the power needs of these data centers are pretty extraordinary. And honestly, I think it's an opportunity for solar and Megapack to continue to expand. When you look at the power generation capacity that was added in the United States, I think 80 or 90%, more than 80 or 90% was renewable. So the cost of renewable just wipes the floor with everything else. There's some natural gas being added as well to replace coal that doesn't have, sort of the intermittency issues of renewables. But you just can't beat a solution where you don't have to buy fuel, right? If you're constantly buying and shipping in coal and natural gas fuel to power your generator, that's a huge cost. If the wind and sun just show up and you don't have to pay for them, that's a dramatically better cost structure. So I think the build out of power to support these AI data centers, to support the transition to EVs and everything else, is going to be largely solar and wind plus batteries. And that's an enormous opportunity for Tesla, honestly, beyond what they're doing in AI training and AI software, but just on the battery side.
Thanks, Omar. So getting back to August 8th, do you guys realize that Franz von Holzhausen, the chief designer for Tesla, he started thinking about this Robotaxi first, autonomy first designed vehicle in 2018. And every time he's been interviewed, he always been asked, what is your, most favorite, most respected design that you're working on or that you've done? And he said, it's actually the one I'm working on now, very likely referring to this. he's been working on this for a long time. So they've given it a lot of thought, and he's just a seller. He's got tremendous reputation for being excellent in his design thinking. What do you guys think? But his, I know we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but any comments about France having a chance to completely redefine what autonomy, or what car travel means?
Yeah. I think Franz has to be the most influential auto designer of the 21st century. I was just at Electrify Expo down in Long Beach. I took a look at all the legacy auto EVs. They all look like Teslas on the inside. They got a screen in the center. They've taken so much inspiration from Tesla. And it's really interesting when you look at the sexy lineup. Franz really started by saying, EVs look weird. We don't want EVs to look weird. We want them to look like normal cars. So they took a more conventional sort of approach. They made it look like a good looking gas car in many ways. And people caught on to that. And then with the Cybertruck, they did something very radical. And people thought it was crazy, but you're seeing the reaction in the marketplace. It outsold the Rivian R1T in the first quarter. The conventional truck that everyone said, oh, this was a better design. The weird trucks outsold it in the first quarter. It's looking like it's going to outsell the Lightning in Q2 or Q3. And, everywhere I go, people are just coming up to me. I'm sure Jeff can attest to this. And they're just saying, wow, this thing is incredible. What is this? It's like a rolling billboard for Tesla. So the crazy risk they took with Cybertruck, in my view, based on what I'm seeing now that these things are out there on the streets, really paid off. And so it'll be interesting to see with the Cybercab what kind of direction they take there. The Cyber name kind of suggests a stainless steel exterior, kind of like Cybertruck maybe, although I don't know for sure. I think it would make sense for a driverless vehicle not to have paint and to maybe work that way. I think this is really going to be a vehicle where form follows function, meaning they want it to be a small vehicle that feels like a big vehicle. A small vehicle because you want to achieve the absolute lowest cost per mile. That is the North Star for this vehicle. And I think if you have maybe 4 passengers or something, you can take a Model 3 or a Model Y Robotaxi. But for this vehicle, they really wanted to optimize and get to the lowest cost per mile possible, because that is going to be what ultimately helps them win the market. You look at freight shipping, for example. Nobody cares what kind of truck you have, what color it is, how fast it goes. All they care about is the price. Freight shipping is a commodity. And so that, I think, is going to be the number one thing in ride hailing as well. So they said, look, most rideshare rides are 1.2 people. Most of the time, one person, sometimes 2 people. Let's make a vehicle for that bulk of the workload that can handle 1 or 2 people, and that can be small. And because it's small, you need less battery to achieve the same range. So less battery to achieve the same range, that means you can make more of them, right? So really the design follows, the form follows the production. It's all sort of considered together to achieve that goal of lowest cost per mile. And it's a very different design philosophy than what you've seen from, Zoox or Cruise Origin, for example, where they have this big boxy car with seats facing each other. This is a completely different take on what that Cybercab should look like. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see.
Okay, I would like to invite Lord Pretty Flacco up. He's on a speaker board here. I highly recommend people to follow him on X. He has been working on a Robotaxi business plan, a business model, deep dive into Tesla's kind of plans and what it could look like. And he's been teasing it out, been sharing some slides here, and you can actually buy the whole thing at this point to subscribe to him. And then eventually what we'll do is we'll also do a interview of him and he'll share that. But it's one of the most complete, very impressive analysis. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Hey, how's it going, Herbert? Thanks for the intro. I appreciate it. A lot of the sentiment that Omar's sharing, I completely agree with. I think we should have, we should never really hype up events, but when we think about 8.8, we should keep in mind, some of the excerpts from Walter Isaacson's book, right? And especially the phrase that was described by Elon and how he thinks about it. I think it sheds a lot of light. Historically, mega historic product, or whatever he said, right? I have to pull up the quote later. I and as you talked about, it's been under the works for a couple of years, right? A lot of iterations, I'm sure, and I'm positive they've landed on something really interesting. So the way I like to think about things is I like to assume that management knows exactly what they're doing, and whatever information they tease to us, I like to try to understand or try to reverse engineer what they're actually anticipating, what they're planning for, because their planning cycles are multi-year. It's stuff that Elon has projected years ago came true. Even though it took several years, they have clear plans on the trajectory of their business. So I like to work backwards from that. I like to use a lot of the clues that they share, a lot of data points that they share, and try to work backwards from it. So the biggest question I have is, if we have a cybercab, let's say being unveiled this year, and then going into production next year, that assumes one of two things, right? Either Tesla's going to sell those cybercabs to someone other than themselves, or they're going to operate it themselves, as basically purchasing it and then operating it themselves. They have to have somewhere to put it. And so what I'm looking for in this event is I really want to see some clarity on the roadmap to actually launching at various cities, whether it's the announcement of approval of a permit for a pilot city, or if it's just something a little bit more broader. I think that the big head scratcher for me, and as you guys probably know, even from 2022 when I went to the shareholder meeting and asked Elon myself, when is the pilot city coming? That's kind of the big thing for me is just like there needs to be more clarity on the ramp up schedule, because when you model out the business, if you're a hedge fund analyst or a PM of sorts, you need to assign a confidence level to your financial projections, and some of that goes into this is the number of cities that can be launched and how many robotaxis can you actually fit in each city, assuming no government interventions, meaning like fleet caps, for example. So all of those things really are kind of going to be the big unlock. And so that's why I kind of, call this upcoming chapter like the great repricing of Tesla, because what's going to end up happening is that there's going to be one catalyst. We don't know exactly which one it may be, but there's at least a dozen or so that are coming up over the next year or so. But one of them are going to trigger this big rush to begin reducing the discount rates applied to financial projections for the robotaxi business. So that's kind of where my mind's at. I'm really trying to filter through a lot of the noise and just focus as much on identifying signals as possible and keeping my eyes on the prize in terms of that. So, but would love to hear you guys' thoughts. Like, for the Cybercab, do you think that Tesla's going to be selling them, or are they going to be buying them themselves and operating it?
And I've been saying for years, I don't see how they're going to sell the cybercabs and why they would sell the cybercabs. The margins and revenue is just too compelling. You don't need to sell it to make what, $7 grand, 10 grand for the sale itself. They will lease it out and then let fleet managers operate it and share on the margins. But this idea that they will still continue to sell what I call the drivable cars, the sexy cars, the 3s and Ys, they'll sell those and let you, as owner of those, turn that into a robotaxi if you want. But this robotaxi first design thing with entertainment in it, it's going to be, I hope and I imagine that it's going to be very different, right? It's not just a car with steering wheel and brakes removed, and it's still exactly the same experience. I think it's going to be completely different. And so Tesla's going to own that and they're going to carry it forward. I just can't see why they would sell this.
Agreed. Herbert, by the way, have you ever been in an Uber Black in Tokyo before?
I've not, but I've been to the London cabs, which is these massive cabs that feels great inside. Is
exactly. Exactly. Just picture that. That's kind of where, just when I think of an illustrative example, I think of something like that. Whether it's, an Uber Black in Tokyo or one of those vehicles that you mentioned over in Europe. It's going to be an experience where it'll be voice interactive, meaning they're absolutely going to integrate Grok into the experience. You hop in the car, hey Grok, how's it going? Can you take me over to da da da? If you already have the destination in the app, that's going to be fine. They're going to be able to play your, Spotify playlist, control your climate, tell you about what's going on Twitter or X, I should say. So it's going to be this. It's going to be a really clean experience, I'm sure. So I don't have any qualms with that. It's just a matter of like, my mind, where my mind currently is like, where are we going to put these robotaxis? How many can we fit in each of these regions? How are the regulations for each one? And what kind of confidence interval can we assign? Because as Omar said, if we're going to go into volume production in 2026, that assumes that we're not going to have that much regulatory headwinds. And I would love to get there personally, but I want to be able to get there with more confidence.
Yeah. Didn't James Dama calculate using Uber data that all Tesla would need is 100,000 cars to service a city like Chicago? And if you got one city that agrees and gives you the regulation go ahead, you got 100,000 cars there. And once you prove it there and everybody's happy with that, you'll just pick the next city and the next city and the next city. It's going to be a while before they hit a regulatory roadblock.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, when I take a look at the regulations, at least as it's, I think it's the website is like NCLS. I'll double check later, but there's right off the bat, there's 7 states that definitely have friendly AV regulations, and there's some of the larger states as well. So when I actually so what I did was I pulled the data for the top 800 cities in the United States, the census data, and then tried to work backwards to determine a number for the supply capacity in terms of the number of full-time robotaxis that each city can have. And then I kind of grouped them by state, of course. So what I looked at was like, the top 5 states or the top 10 states, and they completely dwarf, the bottom 30, bottom 40. So what really matters is really those top 10 states. I'll try to find, I think I posted a screenshot, but I have a breakdown of each of the states, and if anyone's interested, I can share that out.
Yeah, I've done a show where we reported that it's actually in the U.S. It's default. By default, you are allowed to launch a robotaxi service and plan. Like both pilot and service. You can do this. And then these 10 states that actually enacted laws, they did that because they were supporting robotaxi and they wanted to make sure that they had their laws supporting it. And the others are just not, they haven't done anything yet. And so it's not this notion that regulation is going to be a huge headwind may not actually be true. I'm not ready to say that it isn't, because obviously it's something that you can't just say it isn't, because it can easily create a law that just bans it, but it's still something that it's opposite of what people think.
Yeah, and especially when you take into account the production ramp up as well, right? Because for example, if you're pushing out, let's say 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 units per week, that's, if you're looking across states and across cities, you're probably going to be able to put them to work. It might be, like you said, it might be a while before you start hitting sort of like a headwind in terms of like, oh, we've already maxed out, all the cities that are friendly regulation. And now we're kind of waiting for these guys, blah, blah, blah. But the only reason why I bring it up is because, for example, right, in Waymo, for California, California has 2 processes you have to, 2 permits you have to get. One from the DMV and then one from the CPUC. And what I read, if I remember correctly, it took 8 months between the time when Waymo got their DMV approval to when the CPUC approved them as well. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because there's just these micro kind of like delays or micro headwinds that can cumulatively add up. But I think to your point, if the ramp up schedule, let's say, starts in the second half of 2025, we're on version 13 or even version 14 by then, and already have proof of concepts in various cities, other jurisdictions are probably going to catch on pretty quickly. Not to mention if China, rolls it out or opens the door right off the bat and puts pressure on the U.S. as a result, right?
Yeah.
So
I want to ask a question to Omar. So in Master Plan Part 2, which he wrote and published in September 2022, and this is many years ago, he said something like, we expect that worldwide regulatory approval will require something on the order of 6 billion miles of FSD driven. So he's saying that if we have 6 billion miles of FSD, that's probably enough for fleet learning, that there'll be enough data to prove to regulators, and he'll get worldwide regulatory approval. Now, this was 2022. This is before ChatGPT took the world by storm, before people understood that AI neural networks. This is before Tesla decided to switch to neural networks. Do you think that number 6 billion is still accurate? Where are we today? I think you did a post recently that we should be hitting 2 billion soon. And does it matter? Like, would it be less or would it be more than 6 billion given the changes in the world?
Well, I mean, does he, he's just kind of saying he thinks it would be around 6 billion. I wouldn't take this number too seriously or try and overanalyze it. It's not really what's important. What's important is actually how many drives can it do perfectly without any human intervention. So, and I'll just say, based on your earlier conversation, I expect them to probably start taking pre-orders at the event. I don't think that they would not sell it. It is obviously just a situation where if you're selling it, then the more you sell, the more cash the company has. But if you're not selling it, then the more you make, the more money you lose, right? So if the thing costs, let's say, $30,000 to build, and you build 1 million of them, then that's going to cost you $30 billion, right? So you send these things out, maybe start making some money, but you have to manage them all. There's management overhead involved, other overhead, cleaning, stuff like that. I think they're probably going to want to sell them. The Uber network has been successful in dominating the world because of its sort of franchised network. The fact that you have these sort of independent contractors taking on all the costs. That's really been shown to be the only ride sharing model that scales. And these ride sharing services that are entirely owned by the company, they are always far more limited in scale. So, I expect Tesla to maintain their own fleet, probably somewhere on the order of, 10 million vehicles long term that they maintain, and then, sell the vehicles when they age out. But I believe that they're also just going to sell this to customers. It'll be a vehicle that anybody can buy.
Okay, good. Let's bring up a brighter future. I'm going to bring back Jeff.
Mike is
There
on.
you are. Yep, there you
Hi.
are. Hey.
Thanks for taking my question. I guess is it possible, and this is going to come across as permeable, but I guess I'm in the right crowd. Is it possibly slightly bullish that, we didn't take delivery of these H100s, or maybe reasons more along the lines of possibly Dojo's coming along or showing signs of being a more productive and efficient unit for Tesla? And yeah, I guess that's kind of the direction that I'm thinking is, perhaps we're seeing something after, the 2 or so odd years of developing Dojo where, maybe they're on the second revision, or they think by the time they need it, that's going to be a better fit for them to ramp up with. I think that's probably unlikely, but Does anybody else think that that's maybe a signal?
No, I don't think so. I mean, they did still take delivery of the H100, so if they had Dojo working, then they probably wouldn't be buying tens of thousands of H100s. So I think that kind of speaks pretty loudly when they're spending $3 to $4 billion on Dojo, and I don't think they're going to give up, but I don't think that they've been able to outpace Nvidia, and it's going to be a tall order the way Nvidia is iterating now. So we'll see what happens. I mean, they have a pretty interesting architecture. They are in mass production, but I don't think that's the reason behind this. I think it's really just, as he said, due to the construction of Giga Texas and the data center they're building there.
Do you have clarity on? So, I mean, that leaves more than 50% of the 10 billion that he's publicly announced, that Elon's publicly announced, was going to be set aside for training chips. I mean, the quick conclusion anybody's gonna draw, first of all, or their first thoughts, well, where's the other $6 billion going?
Well, he
Is
clarified that, right? He sent out an email or tweet just today. He said of the roughly 10 billion that they will spend this year, half is internal. So primarily the Tesla designed AI inference computers. He is referring to those computer sensors, the compute that's in the cars. And he said plus Dojo. And then the other half, 2/3 of that is NVIDIA. So 3 to 4 billion he's buying NVIDIA.
I see that as extremely bullish. I mean, and the fact that they're putting majority of it towards their own in-house developed solutions. I'm sure some of that's, the infrastructure to support as well. I'm sure that's not inexpensive at all. But so maybe call 2 billion of that infrastructure and supporting of the facility. Perhaps, or maybe it's all silicon. But yeah, I mean, it speaks a little more highly, especially with that clarification that, Dojo's maybe slightly more than just a hedge since it's optimized for the type of training they're doing. I'm not saying that they're outpacing Blackwell or anything. I'm just saying for their application, they might not need something more powerful than Blackwell to tie Blackwell, which is in line with what they've said before and previous guidance. But thank you for taking my question again.
Okay. Jeff, are you back? Okay. While we're waiting for him to come back, Adrian, welcome. I don't know if you've been listening in or.
So warfare, what's happening? What do they do?
Really? You don't know? You're not following?
Is this the NVIDIA chip situation? I think I already covered a little bit of this on Yaman Spaces. Somebody came up and started asking, hey, why would they do this? Why would they not do this? Why don't they have better construction? I'm like, do you not realize that they're constantly building things? And do you not realize that technically speaking, it's good if they share compute, because if XAI is profiting, so is also Tesla. These are all linked companies. There's so many ways that you can take this and turn it into a bullish thing. And I mean, what are they supposed to do? Just leave the compute there, cold? Why? You're wasting time. Like, especially now. And I mean, don't you want a competitor to something like ChatGPT, especially given that it has a tendency to be offline every now and then? By the way, that recently happened. Various AI service providers went offline, and this kind of happens routinely as well. I haven't seen that from XAI yet. Perhaps perhaps because there's not enough usage on it yet. But this is also something that will be available open source, and I think that's something that a lot of people should be interested in. I myself use open source AI such as Mistral and other models. So this is important. This is good. Meanwhile, you can try and do the same thing with something like ChatGPT. Good luck. That thing fucking sucks, because the only thing they will ever open source is something that is so inferior that you cannot actually build a product on top of it. That's why they released their own thing that's called the GPTs, which is just basically wrappers on wrappers. It's like, ugh. You can make something out of it, but it's basically just ChatGPT with a system prompt. No different.
I love it, Adrian. You're so good. So, earlier, Omar, you said that on 8.8, you expected possibly, right, that you're going to be able to interact with a car through some sort of kind of speech. And so if they had, with XAI, getting this H100s in January, do you think that by 8.8, they'd have something that's powerful, that's worthy, that's impressive? And what kind of interactions would you be able to do with the car?
Well, I don't know if this is going to be available to demo at the release or not. It may, but I imagine that voice would probably be one of the primary ways that you can communicate with the driverless car. I think basically the touchscreen and voice will serve as input mechanisms. So you'll be able to, for example, push a button to tell the car to go, to stop, and you should be able to talk to it, tell it things like, "Hit pull over here. Can you let me out here? Actually change my destination." Um, anything that you would say, and in multiple languages, it should really be able to understand you. That's really going to be the primary way we interact with these cars. So the language model is really key. And obviously, using something from OpenAI or from Google, they would obviously charge you to use that. If they can build their own model through XAI, even though it's not officially part of Tesla, like I said, they've released the model. Anybody can use it. Tesla's free to use it, especially given that Elon is the CEO of both companies. I think it is a really important core piece of technology that's good to have under your control, right? It's not owned by Tesla, but it's under the control of the CEO. And I think it potentially saves the company a lot of money, allowing them to refocus on FSD and Optimus and not on training a language model. But it's really going to be, I think, a core part of Optimus, certainly, but also really the driverless car. It needs to be able to talk with people in any language, communicate with them, understand them, and interact with them without physical controls.
Yeah, so this is actually a really good thing that they did this. Adrian, what was the other conversations you guys had at the other space? I mean, that, it's funny how people look at this and they'll walk away with this thinking that it's terrible what Elon's doing. He's doing this on purpose. He's given up on Tesla. In fact, everything he's doing is really good for Tesla. Do you have an opinion on this? Investing in XAI to be able to deliver this LM that you were just talking about?
Well, I mean, you're going to be using a thing that's called the Everything app, and that's X, and that's integrated together, and you'll be using this thing on your car. So, I mean, you're going to be in your car. What are you going to do? You have to be entertained somehow because your car is driving you at this point. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to scroll through X. Okay, you're going to get bored of the timeline. Oh, wait, I want to know something about what's happening. Give me the latest news. Give me a summary of the latest news. Well, Grok is going to do that for you. Grok is also going to do other things. It also has vision. It also has many different other things that we don't necessarily think about. But then there's another little interesting thing that I keep reiterating. That is, that it doesn't make any sense for someone like Elon Musk to hurt his own company, because why the fuck would you do this? Especially given that most, if not all of your wealth is in this company specifically. And then the bear argument would be, oh, well, he's done something like this previously. He has sold a bunch of shares so he can buy X. Yes, because that itself is an investment that will not only boost Tesla, but all of the other companies. And what boosts all of the other companies boosts Tesla because they all function together as a type of unified system. They work with one another. That's what's beautiful, because again, you saw an example of this, and this example should be good, not negative, of basically saying, hey, we have a bunch of compute that we're not using. Let's put it into the AI business we have on the side. Yeah, there you go. Because you have to do something with it anyways. So I don't really see the negative aspects of this whatsoever. It can be spun negatively, which of course is the primary expertise of what Legacy Media always tries to do. And then everybody else just hitchhikes off of that and says, "Oh well, it wasn't technically untrue." It's like, no, it was completely untrue. You could tell a half truth; it's still a lie. There's no other way around it. Half truths are not half truths; they're just lies with extra steps. They are damneder lies because they are somewhat more realistic. So it's more deceptive to tell something that's a half truth. So I mean, you can make whatever argument you want based off of that. So this is just kind of my opinion. I don't see why people are freaking out. And the people who are freaking out, honestly, it's just the usual cast of characters, because Tesla Q is at an all-time low and weakest point, and they really want to bounce back. They're so weak and scared, they're not coming back to this platform because they're all on threads. They're going to come back eventually, and this is kind of where they try to set the stage. That's how I see it. But you're really not going to have much of a good time. And if you want to do something, like they're even trying to clip me and do stuff like this, like, dude, if you want to argue with me, you're just going to become my entertainment. I'm just going to troll you. I am not going to be anything you can reason with. I have zero interest in reasoning with you. I will just troll you. I don't care.
I love you, Adrian. You're so good. It just brings us right back to full circle. You know, Tesla Q can see this is their opportunity. It's back to 2018, and they're going to go at it again. And then they'll take some half truths, like you said, and they'll try to attack with it. So we need to continue these conversations and spread the word. Thank you, everybody, for joining this space. We've done it for 2 hours. This is Cyberbulls. Please follow the speakers, Omar, Adrian, Lord Predeflaco, and everyone else that's on the speaker board. Thanks, everybody. We'll do it again next week. Bye, all.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.